Khizr Khan, the Pakistani-born lawyer and Gold Star father who received national attention following his speech at this year's Democratic National Convention, during which he attacked Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump by name, parenthetically, criticizing a public figure who wants to become our ruler is not an attack, it's an act of citizenship. If Mr. Khan is to be faulted for something, it's for supporting Hillary Clinton. Indeed, you could say that the fault resides in the fact that he accepts the legitimacy of the government that presumes to rule us. That's a deeper critique that is not directly implicated in this discussion. To continue, during which he, quote-unquote, attacked Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump by name, has a history of promoting Sharia, the Islamic legal system going back as far as 1983, insisted the New American Magazine on August 4th in an article written by my friend Warren Mass. It grieves me to say that Warren, whom I consider a friend, is recapitulating lies. I have contacted Warren to explain to him that he has been implicated in a lie, a libel, against Mr. Khan and his family. And I urged him to do something to correct what he published in this essay. He's not done so. It gives me no pleasure to do what I'm about to do, but it is necessary. During 1983, Khan defended Sharia in an academic paper entitled Juristic Classification of Islamic Law, which he wrote while studying in Saudi Arabia. He stated, and the following is presented as a quote, "The invariable and basic rules of Islamic law are only those prescribed in the Sharia. All other juridical works," at this point there is an ellipsis, "must always be subordinated to the Sharia." Warren then comments, presumably all other juridical works include the U.S. Constitution, to which Khan pointed during his harangue. That was not a harangue, that was a very composed and well-presented speech at the convention, declaring, "Donald Trump, you are asking Americans to trust you with their future. Let me ask you, have you ever read the United States Constitution? I will gladly lend you my copy. In this document, look for the words liberty and equal protection of law." Trump responded, "While I feel deeply for the loss of his son," that response came hours after Mr. Trump's initial response, which was to suggest that Khan's speech had been written by Hillary Clinton and to cast aspersions on the mother of Humayun Khan, who was at Khizr Khan's side during that speech, suggesting that she had been forbidden to speak when actually she was incapacitated with grief 12 years after losing her son. Trump responded, "While I feel deeply for the loss of his son, Mr. Khan, who has never met me, has no right to stand in front of millions of people and claim I have never read the Constitution, which is false, and say many other inaccurate things." No, he had every right to do that. Had it not been for the fact that Khan and his wife, Ghazala, were the parents of Captain Humayun S.M. Khan, who was killed in Iraq after an explosive-laden vehicle drove into the gate of his compound while he was inspecting soldiers on guard duty. By the way, this description and summary of what happened is a lie by omission. Captain Khan placed himself in harm's way to protect his fellow soldiers and the civilian employees at that base. He took 15 steps in the direction of that truck to interdict what he knew was a suspicious vehicle. It's not that he was incidentally killed, it's that by placing himself in danger, he gave his life on behalf of his buddies. He shouldn't have been there. He should not have been part of that criminal enterprise called the Iraq War. In this isolated instance, he displayed personal valor in protecting the lives of his friends. That should not be minimized, as Warren did in this article, which is typical of the mendacious effusions that we are seeing from the punitive populist right in attacking the Khan family. Had it not been for the fact that Captain Khan was killed, the speech would have been dismissed as so much partisan rhetoric. However, Khan's status as a Gold Star father has granted him apparent bulletproof immunity from any and all criticism, especially from Trump. No, what that means is that you're not entitled to lie about him and his record and his values and his opinions. Like most people, Americans honor their fallen warriors, and such honor is often extended to the families of fallen soldiers, whether the families have done anything to deserve such honor or not. It is simply considered poor form to say anything that might cause more emotional suffering to those who grieve. While it might legitimately be said that Khan's very public condemnation of Trump invited a response, the mass media and political figures disagree. In other words, we're supposed to believe that Trump is the victim here. With respect to Khan, Warren continues, is he merely the father of a war hero who has been unfairly persecuted, or does he have personal baggage that should be called into question? A report in Breitbart notes that in 1983, the same year he wrote Juristic Classification of Islamic Law, Khan wrote a very sympathetic review of a book compiled from a seminar held in Kuwait called Human Rights in Islam, in which he pointedly praised the keynote address of Allah K. Brohi, a Pakistani pro-jihad Islamic jurist. Brohi did not support jihad in the sense of waging war on the West to conquer it on behalf of Islam. As was the case with the United States government at the time that conference took place in 1980, he supported the jihad in Afghanistan against the Soviet occupation of that country, which was being carried out for the purpose of conquering a religious people on behalf of militant atheism in the form of Soviet communism. He was pro-jihad in that sense, as was the John Birch Society, which publishes the New American Magazine, and which included on its speakers bureau in the 1980s a wonderful little man from Afghanistan named Abdel Shams, who would open his speeches at John Birch Society functions with an Islamic prayer delivered in his native Pashtun language, and then would go out of his way to express a sense of identity with the Birchers in the audience on their shared belief that the state cannot be the measure of all things, that those who exercise the supposed authority to govern other people have to be held accountable to God's law. As he understood that concept, it was very different in many ways from the understanding of the Christians who would gather at these John Birch Society functions for the purpose of hearing him describe what the Soviets were doing to his country. Here's a very brief excerpt from the keynote address by A.K. Brohi, entitled The Nature of Islamic Law and the Concept of Human Rights. Beginning at page 49 of this keynote address, we read a critique that he offers of the modernistic view, the secular view of society, as a view of human history in which the divine presence, principle of purpose, somehow has played no part whatever in influencing the course of human development. This is not so much a criticism of the claim of Islam to be a God-inspired religion, continues Mr. Brohi, as a desecration of all that is good and great in the life of man. All light and grace ultimately flow into the human world from a source which is much higher than the one which on his own can at all be scaled by man. In the last resort, such is the teaching of Islam that it is the divine touch that has transformed the clay model that otherwise is man and given to his creation, to his law, his culture, and to his civilization a celestial dimension. Only when the Spirit breathes on clay is man born. It is God's touch that transforms man into becoming an expression of the divine. The European reached high vistas of human attainment as long as he was loyal to the presence of the divine element in man. In other words, here's somebody who was celebrating what used to be called Christendom, who was a Pakistani jurist addressing fellow Muslim jurists in Kuwait in 1980. But then, in the name of so-called rationalism displayed by the deist philosophers of the 18th century Europe, first rejected the heavenly presence, which hovers above man, and afterwards came to the psychoanalyst Freud and his followers of the 19th century, who unleashed the gates of hell by tapping man's unconscious. The result of this exercise has been the post-Marxist period of European history, which has been barren and bleak precisely for that reason. Now, it is not Islam that European scholarship is wishing to devalue so much as humanity itself. The combined forces of atheism, secularism, and nihilism seem to be on the ascendancy. It is against this background that the contribution made by Islam 1400 years ago can be seen as representing the manifestation of the divine element that somehow will not let man devalue man. I don't agree with this assessment of Islam for a number of reasons, but the point is, this is not somebody who was urging the myrmidons of Muhammad to go forth and slit the throats of impudent infidels who would not make Islam. This is not someone who is urging the imposition of female genital mutilation and other abhorrent practices that are actually found nowhere in the Quran or in the Hadith or in the Sunnah, which are considered to be definitive texts for faithful Muslims. This is not somebody who wanted to overturn the United States Constitution and impose 7th century barbarism. This is somebody who was saying that people who believe that man was created in the image of God have a shared mission in trying to hold back the forces of those who assume that man is the measure of all things and that the state must be all-powerful. Back when the regime used the Soviet threat as the pretext to aggrandize its power at the expense of individual liberty and the society that grows out of the protection of individual liberty, these views were welcome. Now that the same regime is saying that we face an existential threat from Islam, people who decades ago embraced that view are now treating it as if it were subversive. I'll be back in just a minute.